Okay. Sorry for my absence online recently. The whole COVID thing kind of threw my usual schedule to the wind, and so I dropped my normal schedule for streaming and am still trying to figure out what it's going to look like. There's a good chance I'll just be moving from Thursdays to Tuesdays and still try to do it weekly, or it might be every other week. We'll see. I'm still trying to figure it out. So once I know, I will actually put a schedule back up on my Twitch page. Tonight we are going to do something a little bit different. I'm going back to the System.CommandLine library that I've worked on in the past. Today we're going to go through and put the C#8 Nullable reference types in. So for people who are unfamiliar with it, on C#8 they added a feature so that the compiler can help detect null reference exceptions, or where you might be causing a null reference exception. But to do that, you have to be explicit about what variables and properties and arguments can potentially be null and which ones are expected to be non-null. It's worth noting that this is just static analysis. Just because something's declared non-nullable doesn't actually stop somebody from passing a null in. So you still have to do the checking, but at least it lets you go through your code and get some really good analysis on where you might be making mistakes, because when you have to be explicit about what's null and what's not, things start to kind of shake out. So for those people who are familiar with like JetBrains' annotations for like can be null and not null, it's similar to that, only a lot more powerful. So we are going to dive in. Let me first start with a couple links. So I started this, and I'm going to be, I believe this is all pushed up. I'm going to be starting from this branch here. So my GitHub, command line API, and then it's the nullability branch. So I've gone through and done at least the first pass and done a lot of the easy stuff, right? So there's a few, for example, invocation pipeline, right? So there's a few things like this. So for nullable reference types, the key thing is the signature matches what you would do for a nullable value type. So int question mark to make yourself a nullable int. Reference types now play by the same rule. If you put a question mark, it indicates that it could be null. No question mark, not null. But because this is a syntax change, you have to opt into it. So up in the project file, what I've done is I've turned Nullable enabled on. It's worth noting that some of the features that we're going to use do require you to be on Visual Studio 16.3, as well as your project needs to target either Net Standard 2.1, .NET Core 3.1, and I don't recall the framework equivalent, maybe 4.8.2, question mark. Not 100% positive. We'll get to why that matters in a moment. But the first pass that I went through and did is basically cases like this, right? So before the nullable stuff, we had something that looked kind of like this, right? And so it's very clear that this parameter is obviously nullable, right? We set a default value of null, so we're going to declare it as nullable. And so you start declaring things like this, and a whole bunch of stuff starts shaking out. And once you turn this on, what you end up with is this lovely warning, CS, let's make this bigger. There we go, CS8604, right? And so it goes through, and now that the compiler has knowledge about what can be null or what could not be null, it starts to complain and saying, hey, what about this? What about this? And so it is a big syntax change. You end up going through your entire project and really just trying to decide, is this nullable? Is this not? Am I handling null? Am I not? And then decorating it appropriately. And because just putting a question mark isn't always the right answer, we're going to look at some, I'm trying to remember there's a special attribute that they have that says, trust me, it's not null. The way that it was pitched at one point was the damn it operator. In most cases, it's I think it's more like the trust me, I'm the programmer. So I've gotten the System.CommandLine project. I unloaded everything but this one project because I didn't want to deal with any extra fallout. I was just interested in the core project, so I unloaded everything and was just decided I'm going to start working through all of these, and I'll do this on a project-by-project basis and deal with fallout as it comes. So I went through and handled what I thought were all of the easy cases like this, right? So very clearly nullable, go through and make the change, and just kind of did a first pass. So these remaining 50 warnings, which there may be more, are all of the hard cases, right? The ones that took me, or that I said, this is going to take me more than 3 seconds to evaluate, move on, and I'll come back to it. So we're going to start working through some of these, and I don't know if I've got a good place to start, so I may just pick somewhere and start going, and then we will see how that goes. So if people have questions on this stuff or figuring out how to do it, the other, let's see if I was smart, there is, so the actual, nope, not that link. That's the magical link I want. So there is a specification for the C#8 nullability stuff. And then what's kind of hidden and not always well talked about is, let's see if I can get this, is this guy here, is how to start handling some of the more unusual cases, right? So, because ultimately there's a lot of cases where just saying nullable or not isn't quite true. For example, the try parse methods, right? So let me see if I can land on one real quick. Thank you, John. I don't know if brave is the right word. Stupid, crazy. I initially decided that I was going to go through and take this on at about, it was a 1 a.m. coding session, and I was like, yeah, let's do this. Let's start. And at about 2 a.m. I realized, yeah, this was probably not a good idea to start at 1 a.m. Fortunately, I have multiple Mountain Dews, so hopefully okay. We'll see. We will see. Okay, so let's just start going through and picking on these. So this one's probably a simpler case to play with. So, and this is one where I'm not 100% sure. I think I remember looking at this. So we have this add method here. It's very simple. Takes in a string name and a string value. I declared the value as nullable because I believe there was a usage where we were very explicitly passing in something that could be null. And I think it was this guy here. So, and again, these things kind of move up and move down. Yeah, so value can come in as null here, right, from the directive node. This guy is calling add. This lands in here, and we might very well have the add. Now, the part that gets interesting is this is the case where the list is already added to the dictionary, right? So I went to get the list of values out. If the list doesn't exist, we don't allow a null to be added. But if the list does exist, apparently we do allow a null. So the question is, should we? And I think the answer is no. I think, and John, feel free to tell me if I'm stupid, because you'll unfortunately get to see this pull request at the end. But I think the answer is, in this case, we don't want null values to get added into this. Mostly because we've got like these contains where we're ultimately looking to pull non-nullable strings out. So I think the answer is we don't want to let the null go in. Because this is ultimately the warning, right? Is we've told it that we expect a list of non-nullable strings, and we're allowing a potential null to get in. So I think we basically want this same logic, but because I'm crazy, I'm going to pull this out, right? And do something like this. Sounds right. Be careful, John. It's telling me that it sounds right is sort of license for me to start breaking things. So let's see. Actually, let's do values here, drop this guy here, and then this guy will become values here. We'll put the list in, values, values. Right, and so this is effectively empty now. If the test passed, nothing is broken. That wasn't already broken. Excellent. That's what we like to hear. And then we'll just invert the if statement and whack the else. Okay, so what are you? Inline out variable declaration. Sure, we can inline that. Why not? Okay, 1 down, 49 to go, assuming no more crop up as we go. So F8, and let's just jump to the next one. Okay, so this is another one that gets a little interesting, right? So this iValue descriptor has a type property on it that is declared as non-nullable. So the question is, should it be nullable or should it not be? And this is where I believe I saw multiple cases where it could go either way, and I think the answer is the expectation is non-null. I think. But there was obviously a lot of usages here. I'm a little disappointed that my extension doesn't change the font size of visual or of my ReSharper Find All window. Might just have to go through and check it. So what I'm really interested in knowing is looking at its usage and determining if the expectation is nullable or non-nullable. So it gets passed into here, which is declared as non-nullable, and this guy clearly isn't checking for null, so that's expected. Okay, find results, right? So that one's there. These are just equality checks. Let's see, that's an equality check. How does this one get used? So convert if needed, takes in a type. Same thing, clearly non-nullable. So that's not expected to be null. So I think the answer, and again, the problem with the nullable reference types is it's all about declaring your intent. The problem is sometimes going through your code, it's not always clear what your intent was. Because I've now done this on multiple projects. So here, for example, right, we're doing value type dot get default value for type, which I know is an extension method, but I don't think it checks for a null. Right? No, it doesn't. It just dereferences. So, okay. So that clearly is expecting non-null, expects non-null, expects non-null. Okay, so I believe the interface is correct. This should be non-null. Okay, so now back to wherever that usage was that was squawking at me. So here, right? So we agree that this guy should be non-null. So the problem is argument type is declared as nullable. And I think this should be non-null. I think. But I'm very aware that that's likely to cause a problem up here. So if we go and look at our constructors, the issue that we have here is that it's saying if you invoke this constructor, you've told me argument type is non-nullable, but you haven't given it a value, therefore the default will be null, which is probably wrong. And I'm trying to decide if we can just get away with something like type.missing. Is that? Oh, what are you? Why are you declared as object? Yuck. So that ain't gonna fly. So let's think about this guy here. So if argument type isn't specified, I'm sort of wondering if something like maybe type of void is what's expected here, right? And this is only mostly good because you can see that it's still whining about this set, right? Because even though I've now set it, I've taken care of that problem, it's still possible for somebody to call this property and set a non-null value into it, which is yucky. This guy, no, it can't be made private. Bad ReSharper. I'm kind of thinking we lead with that and just see how it goes, because there is a argument generic class. So if we take a look at that guy real quick, boom. So argument of t, right? And his whole thing is he sets the argument type to be t, so that gets set appropriately. So there is that. This is bothering me. We've got constructor chaining, but the constructors aren't in what I would deem order, right? Ding, ding, ding. So, or something thereabouts. So what is your problem here? The constructor can be made private. Nope, don't care. Don't care. Okay, so we're going to lead with that, I think, and let this guy default to void. We'll probably end up having to deal with that setter at some point, but oh well, we'll come back around to that. Okay, so here we go here. So parent here can be null. Okay, so what are we looking at? We've got an argument result, which is used when parsing arguments, right? And the parent comes in, and parent result is nullable. And then we call validate. So the question is, should this guy be taking in a nullable value? And so let's look and see how is this used. So there's a switch here where it might do some work. And then that would end up getting set here. So this guy clearly is set up, this argument result is clearly set to handle a null. The problem is this method returns a nullable value, this returns a nullable value. I'm kind of wondering if this should just be nullable, because if a null comes into here, this guy will clearly handle it. I think that's the appropriate fix. All right, so now that guy stops whining, that goes away, next one down. We now have this problem here, right? Is, okay, if null comes in, so can it be null though? So the answer, John, I think comes with this parent, because I believe on this guy here, if I remember correctly, there is a code path where we pass in a null, and I think the only time parent is null if it's at the root, which I assume would be a command result rather than a symbol result. So, sorry, let me find my way through this real quick, because I believe there was a path through where null was very explicitly, yeah, so command result here, right? Parent comes in and can be null. And so the answer is, I've at least got one code path where I can get into here and be null. Can I get to here in that case? That is a fair question. Because argument conversion result, I think the answer is yes, because inside of the command result, if we call argument conversion results, I think this is possible. Is it possible for the children, if we're iterating over the children, their parent should be this, right? So that shouldn't actually be possible. Let's see here. Argument conversion result. This guy's expected to always give one back, which I think is fair. So I don't think that's a problem. You know, you make a good point. So the only two cases that we have here are option and command result, and they always iterate over their children. And I assume if you're iterating over your children, parent must be set. For this, I like to fire up live unit testing and crunch, add an if block, and let the test tell me. Well, you make a fair point. So I don't have those, but I do have live unit testing. So we can fire up live unit testing, and some of these classes, because they're internal, I think there's going to be plenty of cases where we can make certain assumptions. Oh, right. Unit testing doesn't work if you unload the unit testing project. So let's see. System.CommandLine test. We'll reload this one. Now, is live unit testing hip enough to that idea? Or is it going to make me stop and reload it? Building one projects. I think it's hip enough to it. Do a test. Build completed with failures. Well, that doesn't sound good. Okay, so I'm going to stop this real quick, and I'm just going to build it myself and see if there's failures. Because I've been working with them all unloaded, so there's a very real chance that I've broken something. Let's go with just the errors for the moment. Project whoota whata. Oh. I broke it because I revved the core project to net standard 2.1. Ah, this is fun. Project command line is not compatible with net. So I'm confused where it's, oh, it's getting it right here. Okay, so we're gonna, I assume, John, if we are able to rev this to net standard 2.1, I'm okay to rev the .NET framework version 2? Question? Net standard, there's a nice chart out on GitHub, might even be in the docs page, where it shows the overlap, right? This is what I want. So 2.1 maps to, uh-oh, John. Uh-oh. Uh-oh. We have problem. There is no net framework. Yeah, that is a bit of a problem. Okay, so, and David, I don't know if you've done any of this work yourself, but so now here's the question, right? Right, the test projects are Net Core App 3.1 already, John. The issue is when doing this Windows thing, it's tacking on Net 4.6.2, right? So the only reason why we have these things is because, for example, why is this on my other monitor? Bring this over. So ready? Not null when, right? So there's a bunch of attributes that you can use with nullable reference types. For example, this is effectively a try parse method, right? So the out variable is declared as nullable. But we know that this guy is not going to be null when we return true, right? Because it's a try parse, effectively. So the question then is, if you want to put these attributes in, they don't exist inside of the library if you are targeting 4.6.2. So I can cheat, and I will show you what I did elsewhere. And please, no one throw things at me. So for AutoMocker, what we ended up doing is the compiler doesn't actually care where the assembly of the attributes, right? It's just looking for an attribute that matches a fully qualified name that has a particular signature. So we could bring these guys in, which is what we did on AutoMocker to support older frameworks, and then reference them that way. I think in the interest of getting this working without making a decision now, John, the answer is I just turn off Net 4.6.2 and carry on my merry way, and we deal with framework versions at a later point. I think that's my answer, in the interest of not getting hung up on little things like compiling, right? So, because that'll show up in a diff and be pretty obviously not a good change, I hope. So let's compile that guy. So again, we could bring those attributes in. We could pound if them for target framework 4.6.2 or something. Like, the question is how do we want to handle it? Because I think to properly annotate nullable reference types, you really need them on any library that's reasonably complex. So I kind of think we need them, and so the question is how to handle it. Because I don't think this library should necessarily drop support for older frameworks. There's enough people still compiling for .NET Framework, myself included. Oh, good. I only broke a couple things. So now you're going to make me get confused. Typo correction. Apparently, I broke something. Oh, I probably changed behavior. Expected string, empty string to contain quote, quote, EEN, but was not matched. Did you mean bin? Well, should contain this. Turns out, does not contain that. It came back with an empty string. So, I think this is actually in the... Let's go and fix this real quick, because we probably should have had these on the whole time to make sure as I was making changes I wasn't breaking things, but so much easier to just unload stuff. So David, adding your own attributes for Nullable stuff if you're targeting .NET Framework seems to be pretty standard. And then a wonderful link. Let's just take a look at this. Visual Studio Project System. Yeah, and I think I actually stole the file that I used on AutoMocker from one of these Microsoft projects where I saw somebody else adding it. I can't claim to be the one who came up with the idea. I saw it and was like, oh, that's how you do it. Perfect. And then I didn't move on. It actually surprised me that there's not an official Microsoft NuGet package with these things in here to shim it in. There's at least one unofficial package I saw where it looked like somebody had just wrapped these things up. I don't know. It doesn't seem like something I would pull in a NuGet dependency for a single one-liner file, especially for code that's never executed. Framework standard. Love it, John. Love it. Okay, so come in here, come in here. So this is provide. No, we didn't fall into this case. Oh, why? So this uses typo correction, and I think we're right here, right? Because we know that the unit test failed in here. Because if it had provided suggestions, we would have gotten something and not necessarily empty string. So, hey, come here, you. Debug test. Let's just step through this guy real quick. Since it's only one failing test, how long could it possibly take? Famous last words. All of this started because I went to play with an idea I had for cleaning up and making dragon fruit a little more powerful, and then I got blocked by a bug, and then there was nullable reference types, and then just one thing led to another, and I just kept going. Okay, so unmatched tokens, there are none. And treat unmatched tokens as heirs. So that is true, which is what we expect, but there are no unmatched tokens, which is a little shocking to me. And it picked up EE, raw input was EEN. I don't think that matches. Let's go back. Where is my test? Where's my test window? I'm already lost. Team Explorer, go away. Where the... Sounds like a worthy yak to shave. Yes, it is. Let's see here. Where's my... Come on. I know Visual Studio. It is hard to do it. Test. I just want my Test Explorer. Let's see. Problem is I launched that from ReSharper and I don't see it down here. Probably means I'm here, right? Unit tests. Think that one. Oh, that's why. It is hanging out on other windows. Lovely. This one. There's the guy I'm looking for. Unit test, go there. Okay, so all that just because I wanted to get back here. So parse that. That guy came through there. Jump me back. So the parse result, what did you... Confused why... argument. Why was that able to match? I'm wondering if that argument type that we just changed is now affecting the behavior. That is interesting. Okay. So clearly the bug starts here in the parsing, so we're going to just jump to there. Test Explorer. You stay pinned. Live unit testing, you go away for a minute. I don't want to think about you too much. Not that one. Why? At some point in time, If anybody has a lovely extension that will keep your window layout the same between debug and not debug modes, I would love it. That is, I understand it's kind of nice to sometimes having different layouts for when you're debugging versus not, but more often than not, I find myself just wanting the same window layout regardless of whether I'm debugging or editing. I don't want my window layout to change on me. Okay, so same result there, no unmatched tokens. Okay, so let's go run it back and see where it goes. So no shocker there, one item in the collection. Tokenize. Let's take a look. What is in our tokenize? We've got 2 tokens. We've got an implicit command for the executable and then an argument. Okay. Let's take a look here. Parse operation. Great. Execute the parse root command. Token command. There's the example of the null parent, if you care, John. So there's up, advance, parse directives. I think we can skip this. Parse command children. I expect it to be in here. So while more, I expect to be true. Not at the end. And parse option, parse command. Child is null. So this guy here actually was able to parse when it probably shouldn't have. I'm probably going to get in a bit of a pickle if I reset myself, am I? Yeah, because this guy calls advanced. Dang it. Okay, well, let's back up and try this again. Somewhere in here, this broke. Parse subcommand, parse command argument. I assume this is the guy that's now processing that I don't expect. So parse subcommand, I expect this guy to return null. Yep. Okay, that makes sense. Parse option. This is not an option. I expect return null. Great. Okay, parse command argument. This is where it is passing. Command type is argument, so it falls into here. But why does this command have, well, let's just check. This command has an argument, right? With argument, wait, I'm confused. What is type argument? Okay. First or default of this guy. So it's an I argument. And A not is full. What is full doing? Checks the argument. Argument counts. Try gets the argument out of there based on the maximum number. So what is the arity then, I guess, of my argument? So maximum, let's see, arity, maximum number of values, minimum number of values is 1. That doesn't seem right. Right? The default root command is what this guy is generating. Right? Command line, nope, add argument here. This guy comes in. Here's where the arity is getting set. I am not 100% confident here. So if arity is null, oh, this is what we change. This guy here is the break, right? Okay, so, right, let's take this off and just validate real quick, because I'm pretty sure if I do that, it passes. I think because I'm defaulting this guy to not null, and this was checking against null. Okay, so this now makes for an interesting case. Because before we looked at the usages of this and determined at least usages from the interface that argument type was largely expected to be non-null. But clearly we have a case where null is expected. So now once again, yeah, I know. I agree with you, John. Mutable objects are kind of a pain. This is part of the reason why immutable is so awesome in most cases, because you don't have to deal with these weird state-changing things, right? Because I think my comment earlier is we can set this to void or similar, right? But it doesn't stop somebody from setting this in. And I'm sort of wondering now if this guy here should be... Well, let's see. Maybe the solution is this guy here should handle the void case, right? Because I'm guessing he probably doesn't. I kind of like this, right? Let's see. Why do we have all of these? This is nullable, exactly one. So if type return 0. Okay, so if we do that, that lets me put this back on. I'm going to put a to-do in here. To-do what if null gets set. Right? Okay, live unit testing, turn you back on. Now everyone should be happy. At least as happy as they can be. Thinking. Okay. Everyone's happy. Or at least back to mostly being happy. Okay. That guy probably warrants his own unit test by itself. Just to make sure we don't break that. But back to where we were. Let's see. Where are my breakpoints? Where are my breakpoints at? You, come here. Delete all. Yeah, sure. That'll be fine. Okay, error list. Warnings back on. Let's just pick on the next one. You, winner. Error list. Argument type is uninitialized. That's no longer true. That's no longer true. Next one down. Okay, so... I don't know why live unit testing turned itself back off. I must have hit build or similar. Okay, so we've got this case here. We've got get suggestions, text to match. I initially made this parameter nullable because it had a default value of null. So let's see, Megan. Sorry if this is a basic question, but what is live unit testing? Does it test as you code? Yeah, Megan, just like David said, So first of all, I will point out that it is not a feature that shows up in the lower versions of Visual Studio. I think you have to have, it might even be Enterprise. I don't even know if it's in Pro or not. But yes, you turn it on and it will intelligently try and keep track of what you're editing and rerun the relevant tests as you make changes. More importantly, it gives you this nice little green check when it runs a test that passes, or red X's if it fails. So sometimes you can just follow the colorful pictures and figure out exactly what's going wrong without even needing to click on your test, which is really awesome most of the time. So there's other tools like NCrunch, which do similar. They've been around longer. This is just Microsoft's built-in solution, but again, I think it does take Visual Studio Enterprise. Don't quote me on that. Okay, so back to this guy. We've got text to match. We've got these fixed suggestions, which are a list of non-nullable strings, right? And the suggestion source that can pull out more suggestions, which are returning non-nullable strings. And I guess my first thought is, because these can come from the outside, should I really assume that they're non-nullable? I think in this case, because a suggestion source, right? So if we look at these suggestion sources, so in the grand scheme of things, if you're working with System Command Line, these allow you to provide suggestions when people are doing tab completion. So if you've got, you know, some built-in vocabulary or file or database or whatever, you can use this to provide those things. It is important to note it's very intentionally not an async. But yeah. So the question is, should this be nullable? And I think the answer is yes, because this is expected to be implemented by people outside of the library. And because it's people by outside of the library, I can't assume C#8 and nullables. So I think I have to assume that that could be nullable. And then that's going to change what we're doing down here, right? So this guy is now very unhappy, because I've now said that this guy is going to return a non-nullable list of strings, but yet this guy here is potentially nullable. So the question is, how do I go through and do this? So I could go through and, as part of this select mini, when we're building up the dynamic suggestions, verify non-null. It's one option. I could push it through that way. And then that keeps this nice and clean. So what interface is this tied to? Oh, so this itself is iSuggestion source, which is going to mean, oh, yuck. So this is going to propagate like that, right? So that's going to go like that, which now it's going to be unhappy about because of the base. Yeah, so down here, this guy is now going to be unhappy because he wants this. All right, so let it figure itself out there. I think, so there, save. You'll notice, Megan, I didn't even have to hit save before live unit testing got all over eager and had to rerun stuff. It likes to be helpful. Okay, so fixed suggestions is not null here. Agreed. So let's see. Ordered enumerable string nullable cannot be used for parameter candidates of type IEnumerable suggestions extensions containing. So this guy here is a ours. And so what it's saying is that doesn't match, that doesn't match, and that doesn't match. Yuck, which I think is going to then propagate into here. Contains case insensitive. So let's see here. This guy, I don't think we can even get away with this, can we? So value clearly can be null because we are explicitly checking for it here. And if source is null, yeah, if source is null, this guy's going to throw, I believe. Yeah, so source should probably not be null, because that's bad. Value we're going to handle ourselves. But let's step back. So this means here. So I think what we do is this. Like that. Something like that, perhaps. Not a huge fan of it, but as John pointed out, all the tests passed, so haven't broken anything yet. Okay, and I think that is our last guy here. Or do we got another warning up here? That's just resharper. That's just resharper. We're ignoring all of its suggestions about making things private and whatnot because that is not part of what we're doing here. Okay. Oh, you're still watching, John. I'm doing my best to not make you cringe too much. No promises. It's a very real chance I will do it. Okay, so save all. Let's clear out some mess. Carry on. Okay, so argument arity. So this class is here to describe watching from between my fingers. Yes, Perfect. So this class here declares the arity of an argument. So options, commands have arguments that get passed to them, and you can think of this as, you know, exactly one or more, 0 or more, those types of things, right? So minimum, maximum. And we've got a bunch of nullable problems in here. So this is the one that we sort of looked at before, and we determined that this symbol result coming in could be null. The first issue here is command result is not null, but the root portion of it could be. So this guy is very clearly nullable because there's an as cast to begin with, right? And then a dot root on top of it, which just propagates back into itself, right? So this guy's going to walk all the way up, or walk up. So that guy is clearly nullable. This is clearly not checking for null. I think the solution here is null prop, right? Because this guy can fall into here. This argument result is clearly null checked here. So that works. Okay, symbol result. So this is the guy that's coming in here. So the question, first of all, is this is not an extension method, so this may be null. And so if symbol result is null, what's going to happen? If it is null, it's going to come into this switch. It's going to hit the default case and get assigned here, which means argument result is null, which means argument result will be 0. Minimum number of values I don't think is ever expected to be negative. I think in this case, we just tell the compiler hands off. This is not actually a case that matters. So the nullable checking from the compiler it's not recursive, right? So if you call into something, if it can't figure it out just by looking at that one call site, it's done. It's not going to do inspection of the IL inside of your methods or any of that jazz, right? So it is sort of single level, which is how it's able to stay reasonably performant. But it does mean that it's not going to do the fancy analysis. I know the JetBrains stuff tries and does a pretty good job most of the time. But they still don't go inside. They still don't do recursive. But they will do analysis inside of your IL. So we come down into here. So if token count is greater than maximum number of arguments, this would be a 0. So again, remember, in the case where the null occurs, right? So in order for symbol result to be null, token count will be 0. Okay? So in order for that to happen, that would require this to be the maximum to be a negative. And I realize, according to the API, there's nothing stopping somebody from setting the maximum to be a negative. Right? Right? Like the constructor will try and prevent, insane values, but these are just public auto properties. Right? You could go into this thing and say, yep, I know the constructor enforced some level of sanity, but I'm going to change it and do something crazy. But I feel like in both of these cases, I just tell the compiler, no, I know better than you. Trust me, this ain't going to be null. I think that's what we do here. Because rationally, that is not possible. Okay. Let's continue on. So that handles argument arity, argument converter. Close some of these guys up. Okay, so this one's going to be fun. I remember looking at this one earlier. Okay, so here we've got a very unusual use case. So for starters, we've got this large extension method, right? But this is effectively a try parse, right? So it's got returns a bool, has an out parameter. In this case, the out parameter happens to be a value tuple whose individual members are nullable, right? Which they have to be null based upon this. And this gets very, very weird, right? Because ideally, what I'd love to do is put something like not null when we return true, right? And decorate it. The problem is this is a value tuple. You know what? So the issue being here, right? This doesn't work because value tuple will always be non-null, right? There's no, it's a struct, a value type, can't be null. Unless we put a little question mark there, right? Because the hard case right down here is this guy, right? So in the try parse case, right, we return false, null, and null. And so initially I had gone through and marked both of these as nullable because clearly we are setting null into them. Okay, kind of makes sense. But I'm wondering if it makes more sense for these to be non-nullable, right? The value tuple itself to be null, right? And then rather than null, null, this guy sets it to null there. And so not null when true, right? Because if we return true, we know we're going to return a valid value tuple. I wonder if it's cleaner to do null when. Not null when, maybe null, allow null, disallow null. Yeah, so there's a bunch of attributes. We're going to get to another fun case because I know there's cases in here. So right now with C# 8, you can't put attributes on local functions. Or you can't put attributes, on local functions or their arguments and whatnot, right? And we have these things, we've got local functions that follow this pattern that you can't decorate correctly, which is really frustrating. There is on .NET 5, I saw on the GitHub page with all of the potential features, adding that support is in the status of merged. So I think that means high probability that it'll make it into .NET 5 if the code's already been merged. So I'm sure, I don't know what the official answer is, but I'm guessing is probably is about as close of an answer as I'm going to hear. Okay, so I think if we do this guy's private, which means we can change up this signature without doing too much damage, only a couple usages. Great, so let's change this up, right? So I think what we do is this, and we do this, and we make you nullable. Let's see. So this guy here is unhappy because now it's technically tuple.value. Now, why are you unable to figure this one out? Feels like it should be able to identify this one. I'm sure it's the fact that it's not doing extra recursive stuff, but the fact that it knows that this parameter is not null makes me wonder if I've decorated this wrong. Is it supposed to actually be, so let me look. Is this supposed to be decorated on the return type? So attribute usage, not null when. Nope, that is definitely on the parameter. So let's look at which of these are maybe null when. That also goes there. I am somewhat tempted to use the maybe null when and flip it to be the other direction because that's how dictionary is implemented. Not null if not null attribute. Okay, does not return if, does not return if. These things are for like assert type methods, right? So your unit testing things where assert not null. So does not return if various condition, etc. Right? So that's correct there. I'm just surprised that the usage can't figure it out and is going to make me do something I don't really want to do. Jump me there. Okay, I got too many tabs. Some people do really well with lots of tabs. I do not. Okay, so something in the back of my mind is telling me I can do tuple deconstruction here, right? I think in this case what I might just do, in the interest of sanity and simplicity, system in possible invalid operation exception. I am missing the invalid op. What? Okay, I'm just gonna. No, I think I'm gonna leave this alone. I'm gonna ignore that for now because I think this is just ReSharper being dumb. Okay, next up. Okay, so this one gets even more fun. So again, with the nullable reference types, generics get really interesting, right? Because how do you know if a value is nullable or not, right? So, for example, argument converter, this is get value or default, right? There's no rhyme or reason of what t can be. This is unconstrained. And so we now get to the Schrodinger's generic parameters, where it's if this were an int, for example, then obviously non-nullable. But, for example, if it were called with, say, object, nullable. Right? And so the question now is how to properly decorate this, because this is nullable if it's basically the T type here, right? So let's see. So what do we have here? So this value is obviously nullable object. I'm somewhat wondering if the answer is this, right? Because that handles, well, that doesn't quite fix it. So I think what you do is you do something like return maybe null. I think is this situation there, and then this guy becomes like this and like this, I think is the solution. Again, I'm open to other suggestions of how to properly do this, but I think that's probably the solution there. I didn't expose any new things that weren't in here previously. And live unit testing is still green. I've got it kind of minimized. But the little green dots in the top right corner, that's what we were watching. If they go red, it means I've broken something. Okay, so let's carry on. Argument converter, expression extensions. So what do we got here? So this is scary in and of itself. The fact that I see these blue lines mean that I have no unit test to guarantee that I haven't screwed something up. So that's fun. And so here we have an interesting case, right? So this local variable is declared here with pattern matching. And so in this case, it's declared as non-nullable. But down here, it's reused as with an as expression, which clearly makes it nullable. But looking at the code, and the fact that it's not actually, is member expression used further down? Let's see, type and name. Oh, it is. So it's set here, if not null, type and name, and it's just returning out that tuple. So it's this local function is capturing this variable. This looks weird. Also, mild perk. This looks weird. I think what we can do here, though, right? So there's no The only early exit is inside of here. So I think what we just do is this, right? So I think we just pattern match into this, right? Is member expression. Oh, I can't reuse the same variable, though. That's no bueno. Kind of curious. I haven't tried that. Yeah, not exactly surprised. That doesn't make a lot of sense. So I'm sort of wondering if the solution is to not do this weird capturing thing, right? Make this guy static. And do this, right? So this, member expression. This guy then gets passed in there. And this guy here. I think I like the pattern match here as well, right? Let's see. Operand. I think we just do this, pass it in there. Right? I think that gets me closer. I think. Feel free to jump in and correct me. I'm almost out of a Mountain Dew, so there's a very, very real chance that I'm highly likely to make mistakes. But I think that's probably the cleanest. And actually, okay, if we're going to pattern match this, and I've got no unit test to guard me, so why not do a few more refactorings while we're in the middle of this, right? So, so just nest those together. There, I'm sure John would just love to see all of those extra changes tacked into there. Okay, next up on the chopping block, model binder. So, model binder is the portion of the library when you want to do something where you call invoke, right? So you get your string array, you can parse it into an object model, right? And then you can call invoke, and that needs to take that parsed object model and actually call some method on your commands, right? So the model binder lets your commands have nice handler syntax, so you can declare the method the way you want, and it deals with effectively binding those parsed values into the values that you get to act on. So we've got this little case here. So out var value source, and this looks like a similar case, right? Is value source is declared here. This var makes it hard to see. This guy here is non-nullable. This guy here looks to return. So this guy has an out. And I think this guy just needs to be decorated, right? So not null when true. Right? I think that's the simple solution. So when true, this guy will actually have a value. Yeah, a lot of the code is pre-C# 8. No, John, don't take it to mean that I think some of the code is crappy. Like that's the very nature of large libraries, is it evolves over time, and you can always tell the age of code based upon the version of the compiler that it was clearly written against. Like I'll find old stuff that doesn't have auto properties and it's got all the backing fields. It's like, oh, how did we ever write code that way? It's like, oh right, this was, back pre-C# 6 days. Back in the olden days, my properties had to go uphill both ways. Okay. I will be done now before people throw things. Let's see. So converting no literal to non, I am confused. But let's not talk about var. So I will say, so I know you said not talk about var, but I'm going to make one small, teeny teeny point. So there, because VAR is clearly one of those hot topic debates where you will never get people to agree. I saw that even like some of the Stack Overflow guys were debating it this, was it last week? I will say, sometimes VAR, when trying to figure out this nullable reference type stuff, makes it really, really hard. Like, the type may be obvious, but whether it's nullable or not is not obvious. So, an added dimension to consider when deciding whether to use VAR or not. I will leave it at that. And I will stop. Otherwise, I'm afraid what John's going to do is promptly like start just auto-rejecting pull requests from me. Okay, so to non-nullable type. I'm still trying to wrap my head around this one of why this. So, okay, so let's start with this, right? Try get value. So maybe null when false. Oh, see, this is why they did it. Oh, I get it for this case. Okay, so rather than not null when true, you do maybe null when false, and then you can declare it as non-nullable. Ah, I understand now. So what is your problem? Value source is not null here. I agree. I'm going to hit compile because I think you've lost your mind. Because both of these should be, that's an I value source. That's an I value source. Neither one is nullable. I think we're okay. I hope. Okay. Error list. Hopefully should be right at the top. Model binder. Converting null literal or possible null value to non-nullable type. But, right? I value source. But I just declared you as non-nullable. I'm missing something obvious here. Value source, all right? So this goes here. What am I? Do you still think this? You really want it to be nullable. Despite that I literally just declared it as non-nullable. What? Maybe null when false, right? So let's look at dictionary, right? Because this is how iDictionary has it declared. Bool try get maybe null when false, right? Because in this case they don't know what generic parameters you're going to pass, right? And nullable, there's actually an enum that gets passed into here, and I'm trying to remember what it maps to. There is a nullable type. This stuff is, yeah, you'll note compiler generated attributes. But if you ever need to like dig through the code with reflection or IL to determine whether nullability was used, this is the stuff you look for, right? The nullable and nullable context stuff. That's how you can tell whether things have actually been compiled for nullable reference types. But I am still confused why this is unhappy. Maybe null when false. Try get value source. You are legitimately declared maybe null when false. Okay, so here's what we're going to do. We're going to just take this attribute out of the mix for a moment. And I want to see you work. Okay. So that makes sense to me. I'm missing something. Maybe null when bool return value is false. I'm not crazy, right? And it gets unhappy about that. Something feels very wrong about this. Why would it start complaining on the return value of false? Oh, got it. It's not Oh, I get it. I get it. I get it. I get it. So it still wants that, but it knows value source foo gets value source 2, right? So it's cool with that idea because it knows that after the return, this guy has returned true. So therefore, this guy is not null, right? So if I do maybe null when true, I expect it to now be unhappy about down here. Thinking, thinking, thinking. Right. So now it's unhappy because now it knows the return. So it's unhappy about this because this one is non-nullable up here. That's what it's unhappy about. I think we just do that. That seems like the simplest of compiler, trust me, you're wrong. Maybe no one. Let's put this back before I make a mistake and leave it like that, right? I think I just tell the compiler, hands off, trust me, I want to reuse this, and I'll put this back to the var because that's how I found it. Okay, next up on the chopping block, symbol set. Okay, so what do we got going on here? So we've got something about our interface. Let's see, collapse all. All right, so something about nullability reference types and return type of nullable I symbol get by alias string alias does not match implemented member. So get by alias string alias. So let's look at this. Get by alias string alias. Okay, that seems simple. Non-null, non-null. So what have we done wrong? Must be in here. Get by alias. Clearly can return a null. Well, that's fairly obvious that this method is expected to return a nullable type. So I think the solution here is simply to say, yep, null it can be. All right, so we come back here. That guy's now happy. Next up. Okay, so what do we got down here? So we've got a alias already in use. So this guy has an out string that's non-nullable. I think we just decorate this guy, right? Maybe null when, and I think I like doing it this way, right? Declare the value as non-null, right? That way people can use non-null stuff. But hint to the compiler, hey, on a false, you really shouldn't be using the out parameter on a try parse type method on a false return anyway. You shouldn't trust it. Right? Most of them say they're set to uninitialized or null or similar, right? So this sort of makes sense. I think I might go back through and hunt out the other places where I did the try parse by making this nullable and switch it to this so that they're non-nullable. I think that's cleaner. Okay. Again, my opinion. If people have other opinions on whether those are null or not, I would love to hear it. Okay, I think this is actually where we were earlier. Huzzah, we've worked our way back around in a circle. So here we are here. So parent results. So parent can be null, but this was the question of can we get into here? And I believe this is where John had suggested live unit testing, and then I got all kinds of confused, right? So I think the simple answer is we know it's not null, at least in all of our tests. This is internal, so we can certainly make certain assumptions about this, right? This isn't something that somebody from the outside can make a mistake or use with C# 7 or that kind of thing. So it's somewhat restricted. So I don't have to stress too much about that. And so the question then comes is, on this convert, is it possible to call this on an object where the parent is null, since the parent will only be null in the case of the root command. All right, and so, and this is where I think the answer is no, right? Because in this guy's case, where is bad. No, you need to just start closing things. So in this guy's case here, he's iterating over his children. So the children of this command result are clearly not going to be the root command because they're children of something else, therefore they are not the root. Same thing applies to the options one. It has a similar setup. Why will you not jump me to the thing, right? Iterating over its children to build it up, right? This argument result is interesting. I do wonder if it is possible for this one. Okay, because this guy clearly has a nullable parent. So is it possible to hit that? So parse result visitor. Argument results. This will obviously never pass a null, because though it is technically possible to invoke an instance member and have this be null, not something you should ever check for. For anybody who wants a fun brain teaser, try and invoke an instance method where this is null. It's really fun. Here's a hint. It involves delegates. Yeah, because that will, doing things like that is one of those ways to be evil in C#. I've actually thought about doing a talk at some point on just all of the horrible things you can do in C# that you should never do in real life, just to be able to write the code for them. Because it's really unfortunate that there's all these great features in C# and you never get to use them in a real project because they are highly frowned upon. Highly frowned upon. One of my poor teammates, I subjected him to an implementation I did of IEnumerable that uses pointers, because I had to use pointers, and darn it, I wanted a for each loop. And so I had to write my own enumerable. And it was fun. And I'm not sure he thought it was as fun as I did. Okay. So I don't think... I'm really tempted to just flag this guy and just tell the compiler hands off. Like, I'm really tempted to do that. Really tempted to do that. Should check arity. Let's just see, right? So if parent result is iOption result, an option result is implicit. So that doesn't necessarily guarantee that we skip this case at all. But how would we get here? Because we'd have to come in through an argument result. I don't think it's possible, because you'd have to have an argument result that was at the root. And I don't think you can have an the command is the only one where the parent should be null. Everyone else should have a parent. And it's not possible to have an argument through. I'm going to say it's not possible. And the unit tests obviously don't have a null case that comes through here, otherwise this line would be throwing. Right? So, because you can put these annotations in, and again, this does not stop anybody from just passing null in, right? Just because you declare something as non-nullable just means that if somebody tries to pass null in and they're using the latest C# 8 compiler, they'll get a warning. Doesn't stop them at all. They can still do it, right? So, proof is in the pudding. Not null gets null, right? So, I can certainly pass null into it. Non-nullable string. And to make the warning go away, I can tell the compiler, hands off. Trust me, null is not null. I shouldn't, but you can totally do that. Okay, getting sidetracked. Next up. Argument result extensions. Okay, so we've got a generic, and what are you squawking about? Possible null reference return. So get value or default, right? So this is going to pull through, and I think this is the guy we looked at here, right? And I think this is the same solution, right? Is this guy is getting value or default. I don't want to declare T as nullable, but I do want to say if you ask for an object, you might get a nullable object back. Null is totally possible here, but I don't want to change this. This guy, however, I think I do want to change. If you're using this, you should be told that null is very valid. Okay, next up, error list. And these types of changes, this is how this number may not be going down, because we've clearly solved more than 7. We've just gotten ourselves back up. Okay, so this is a great case where I'm going to flip it. Maybe null when false, right? And then I'm going to switch you over to be that, right? Because I think that'll help clean up some of this. So we've got a couple things in here. So maybe null when false. Oh, shoot. Actually, I don't even know if we can make any annotation assumption, right? Mostly because this is a get value or default, the exact method we just looked at. All right. So this guy can clearly set a null into value. And yeah, an argument conversion results. This guy is what? He has an indexer, alias set, and this is the same thing, right? So get by alias can return a nullable, right? And so, and actually, I think I want to change this. I think I want to do this. Hey Raymond, how you doing? Let's see here. Change the return. I think we want to do this and declare it as maybe null, because I don't think I want to declare that T is a nullable type. Simply because if T is declared as an int, and I realize we don't have that case here, right? Let's see, get by alias. What are you squawking about? Let's see. Return is not a valid attribute for this declaration. Why? Oh, what are you doing? How does one declare this then? Oh, like that? Okay. That's interesting. I never considered that this wasn't a return type because this is an operator, perhaps? If this is an indexing operator, then the operator doesn't have necessarily a return value because it's not necessarily a normal method, I guess. Okay. I guess I can get on board with that. Let's see here. Error list. I already lost my place. Okay, so the indexer clearly can return null. This guy can return null. So I think the solution here is null prop. Right? Why do you think that is not conditional access qualifiers known not to be null? Because this guy here is a result set or an alias set of these. No. Okay. So hold on. So object foo gets. I think this is just a bad usage of the attribute. Like even though it worked, right? Because we know that the indexer should be the same as get by alias, right? And we know that one's set up. So we want this to work. So semicolon. So what's interesting to me is that it's telling me that this expression is known to not be null, which really seems to go against what this may be null. Okay, so next up, we're going to look at, nope, not that one. Let's see here. So I think I put this in the chat earlier, but so Raymond, what are we working on here? I know I'm late to the party. No problem, Raymond. I bounce around and do stuff late. So the project in question is System.CommandLine. I am adding the C#8 nullable reference types. So that GitHub link is my branch of the project where I've been working, just trying to do this. So we started off with yesterday and early this morning. I sniped all of the easy ones, and we've been working through the rest of the hard ones. So this docs page here is all of the fancy new annotations that go along with the C#8 nullable reference types. You will note this here, right? If you go back into ye olden days, no show up. I was kind of hoping that the maybe null specifies an output may be null even if the corresponding type disallows it. Yup, that sounds kind of like what I want. Why? So this is allowed on fields, parameters, properties, and return values. I want that one. So why does this not work here? Is it because the type of T switch it to of? I'm not sure I follow. I might. Switch to PC. I think the reason is this guy here is returning is because this is a non-nullable type. No problem, Raymond. I eventually translated. It took me a minute to get all the way through it, but I got there. I am slow, but I've got one Mountain Dew in me and one more worth to go. So I'm not. So this is still okay. We got to get this back down to just the things I care about. Nope. Nope. This. Right? So here is the interesting one, right? It is convinced that I don't need this, right? Autocode says remove conditional access. And I don't understand why. Because as soon as I remove conditional access, possible null reference exception occurs. It's like it both knows and doesn't know. It's bothering me, and I'm wondering if this is a resharperism. I wonder if that is the case. So I'm going to turn this, I'm going to leave this as is and assume that this is a resharperism for now, but I would be very curious if anyone has any insight or ideas to try. Because the fact that it seems to hint that I don't need this on a generic method that is very clearly decorated with the return type possibly being null, right? You'll note that T is a class. I do wonder if there's a potential here, right? Like, we're not preventing. Ooh, contains. Get by alias. Oh, so here's an interesting one. Alias is not null here. I'm starting to think that this needs to be like this. And that needs to be like this. Because that okay, I'm thinking that's the solution, right? Ditch the attribute. That fixes this. This now understands what I mean. I think that makes more sense. Because I think the issue is the generic constraint on T is being tied to class. And I don't want to tie it to something like Nullable class, right? Like that doesn't make sense. Where I can abuse the non-nullable, I'd prefer to. Right? I think that's what I want. But clearly, things like checking and lookup, it's possible for it to not be there. Therefore, null should be valid return. Okay, we're going with that. That's at least an answer I can justify. Nullable C#8 link. Sure. I assume so. For you, Raymond, there's the repo and the branch that I'm on. And if you're, let me actually switch because I think I have the. Where is it? So this is the. Trying to decide, so I can just pull it over here, right? So there's two potential reasonable ones here, right? And it's probably just as easy to pull up the your favorite Bing search engine and punch in C#8 specification, right? And then there's this one here, right? I usually just try to hunt through the docs pages because the docs pages on the Microsoft docs are actually fairly good on covering this. So this is the design with nullable references is sort of a walkthrough of how do I lay this stuff out. And then the spec is all of the gory details. And then you can find the attributes as well. Okay, so this guy here. So value name is potentially nullable. So let's take a quick gander at this and figure out why value name is marked as nullable, because there is a potential fix where we just make it not nullable and we're done. If that is reasonable. So that's a getter. Come on, show me something interesting. So one, this is an argument for it being null, right? Because there was clearly an explicit check for it. So that strongly hints to me that null is a very valid value there. Right, so there's some checks inside of property descriptor as well. Parsing, command result. I think this is just a bug. Right? I think this is just a case where we didn't account for the fact that this could theoretically be null. So the simple answer, right, is you do something like this. Right? But if we're going to do that, right, and have effectively this thing short circuit on the null case, it stands to reason that we shouldn't iterate over our arguments if this guy is null. So I'm going to propose that we do if value descriptor dot value name is string value name, right? So we're going to pull this guy out, check on non-null types. Boom. And then down here, we'll just use value name. So ignore, and then this equals true is no longer a thing, right? So pattern match the string out to verify non-null, and we'll only iterate if we actually have to. And unit tests confirm I didn't break anything. Yay. So it is worth noting that this little squiggly that you see on this is string, this is a JetBrains-ism. They really, really like you to use this pattern. And I really don't like it because it feels like a var. I like that better. And I don't understand why they... So, if somebody knows why they suggest that over the type, I would be very curious to understand it. Actually, do they have a... isn't there a... For some of the resharper ones, they have a Y as resharper suggesting this. That's always handy. And I would love to understand the reason why this is by default at beyond just a minimum of a suggestion, right? On my other machine, I've downgraded it because it annoys me. Okay, error list up, next one down. So we handled that one, let's keep going. Possible null reference returns. So get value or default. This guy, let's see, so he comes in, he asks for it, singular default. So here's one that just looks straight up like a bug to me, right? Like, so here's the hard part, right? The var is hiding it. This is an argument conversion result, but it's a singular default. The or default case worries me, right? Because this means it could be null. Surprised it's not like this, right? Because I think we actually have this case, right, where I need to check it. What are you squawking about here? Cannot lift conditional access T to nullable type. Yeah, I understand. It's because I'm somewhat suggesting that this may be null, right? It may be null based upon, so if we look at this guy here, right? So this may be null based upon the type of T. I'm just surprised that it's not suggesting that this is a problem. How does it get away with that? Singular default has to return null, right? Right? The or default portion of that method says that the default value could be returned. And I don't understand why this is not flagging. Keep going, keep going. So this feels like that should go there. Oh, it's being smart. That's why it's not flagging it. This is an extension method. Ah, look at that. Oh, it's smarter than me. Okay. It looks weird to have a dot on something that could be null, but because the extension method will handle the null case. Okay. Easy peasy. Okay, so here is another case with that value name on isMatch. And I think the solution here is we just account for the null. Let's see here. So what would happen if we short-circuited this? I think in the interest of simplicity, this is the simplest. We sort of have the same thing, though, where we're now technically iterating over children, where in the null case, this is never going to match, right? Because if value name is null, this will get evaluated to null. Null does not equal true, therefore nothing will match. This will be an empty array, which will then not land into either of these cases and will fall down into this other stuff, right? In this case, null is fine, though I do wonder if perhaps we should have a different, because null, when it's put into a string, will just end up as empty string. Maybe we should put something else there. Problem for a different day. Okay, keep going. Let's see, that one we just handled. Okay, so clear up some of these. So get value or default, get value or default. I think this is another case of the return value may be null depending on what your T is. So be smart about it. Let's see here. I think the non-generic case we've been just handling like that, which makes sense. And then, what are you squawking about here? Oh, extra using statements. Does short-circuiting that previous method cause the method to return garbage? So the answer is no. No, you're fine. So the short-circuiting stuff is actually really, really intelligent. So if I can get, I may have lost my context stack all the way in here. But when you do the null propagation operator, even if it's an extension method, the compiler is smart enough to interpret it, and won't actually, if the left side of the question mark evaluates to null, the stuff after the question mark doesn't get evaluated. It means that the entire side, or the left-hand side of this equals expression, if I hover over it, will end up being a nullable, it's reporting incorrectly here, it'll be a nullable Boolean expression. So rather than just having true or false, I now have null, true, and false, which is why you can't just have this anymore, right? Because where wants you to give it a predicate where you tell it true or false for each of the items. And if this is returning a nullable Boolean, that's no longer just a true or false. That's a null, a true, or a false. So we have to convert the nullable Boolean down to a simple Boolean, like that. So effectively do the comparison there. Because C# is not C, we don't have that the implicit conversion to bool. So there is all of that. Okay, don't know if I solved that last one. Let's look at this. So maybe null, we handled that one. Let's jump here. So this is going to be an interesting area of the code. So largely, yeah, so let's see. Sorry, switching my brain. Raymond, okay, that makes sense. I was questioning if changing this line 37 causes the method try get out to return garbage. That's crazy though. Yeah, in general we don't have as much return garbage stuff in C#. I say as much because I've been doing a lot of stuff with pointers and unmanaged memory, and yeah, all of the problems with C then propagate right up into C#. It's wonderful. So if you turn on unmanaged stuff, you can shoot yourself in the foot all the same ways you can do it in C, or at least most of the same ways. It's exciting. So the system command line parsing largely follows a visitor pattern. The problem with a visitor pattern is it's several method chains deep, right? And doesn't lend itself well to the static analysis of the nullable reference types. So I suspect what's going to happen in a lot of these cases is we're just going to use the trust me operator, or I'm trying to remember what they call it. Null forgiveness operator, I think, is the official term. Right? So I suspect that's what we're going to run into. So, for example, we have this case where it says visit, right? And visit takes in a non-nullable node, right? But the problem is on operation, we have a root command node, right? And root command node can theoretically be null, right? So questions, when could it be null? Well, the simple case is when you first instantiate parse operation, right? If you do parse operation, at the end of this constructor, nothing set this. It's still null, right? So it's very possible to be null. The problem being is this guy does get set, if we come back here, operation.parse, right? So root command node gets parse root command node, which is going to return a non-null value, right? Because it just news one up and ultimately returns it. So it's always going to be non-null. So it will be non-null after that method is called. So in this case, just tell the compiler hands off, trust me, right? Because it has no idea that because we called parse, that this property on this object magically got set, right? Again, the static analysis is one level. It doesn't go anything beyond what it can see here. So, okay, next up. Value for option. I think this is another maybe null case, right? Because this is, you've got a parse result, so you've parsed the values from your command line, and it's one of those, hey, you know, I had a username option, right? Give me that string value. So whether this could be null or not is based upon your T And so I think we just say return may be null, right? Because we don't want to declare t with a question mark, because if t was passed as an int, we don't want to magically become nullable int. We want this to be respectful of whatever the caller specified. Again, Schrodinger's generic. It's both null and not null all at the same time, because what we needed was to make C# a little bit more complicated. Okay, so what do we got here? So text to match is a nullable string, which makes sense because it's initialized to null, so it should be nullable. This guy is a non-null return, and this guy down here is matching. So the question is it possible to get to this return statement and text to match not to be set to something? So the only setter is here, which last token dot value would have to be not equal to null. Let's see, raw input not equal to null. So this gets weird right out the gate, because I see a not null explicit check, right, followed by an is null or white space check, which make me immediately look for, say, the empty string case, right? If raw input is empty string, well, that's not null, but I would fall into this case. Is that okay? So more interesting is if raw input is null, right? So if raw input is null, which it is a nullable string, okay. This var I can't deal with. That one needs to be specified. So if raw input is null, we fall into here, we do some stuff, right? Worst case scenario, raw input remains null, position picks this up. So say raw input is empty string, we fall into here, position is null, right? So the initial call, position ends up being 0, we fall out, raw input is null or white space because we're pretending it's empty string for the moment. Source unmatched tokens any, that will depend on what we parsed. So it could be true or false, which could actually let us fall into this case, and this could be null. So we've got at least one path through where it is very possible that this is null. I think what I would like to do is this. Because this is the default return down here. So I think we just null coalesce and return empty string. I think that's the easiest way. Okay, so position here. So is it possible to get here where position has yet to be set? So position is a nullable int. The easiest if case is raw input is null. We fall into here. This becomes null. If raw input is null and we fall into here, we won't get into this else. So that's not a way. That's not possible. So if we go into this else, it's not possible to get down to here, so that's fine. So if we go into here, is position set in all cases? If position not equal to null, that's not possible because we want to find the null case. So we'd have to land here. This would set it. So I'm going to propose that this case is not possible, and therefore we'll tell the compiler hands off. This level of complexity, though, does make me pause a little bit. It does sort of indicate that there might be some cleanup possible. But right now, nullable reference types, not refactoring, not refactoring, not refactoring. Resist the urge, Kevin, resist the urge. Ooh, Mountain Dew. Okay, so what do we got down here? So we've got a enumerable of nullable strings trying to be set into a straight up enumerable of strings. So this guy here, so get suggestions, I believe, is the kicker, right? This is one we modified earlier because we know that this can come in from the outside. So implementers of this might only be on C#7. They don't know about nullable types or nullable reference types, so they don't do it, right? And they kick back a null. So the question then becomes, if they kick back a null, we need to iterate over this. And so the question is, should this guy just be this? And I think the answer is yes. Right, and I don't think it makes a difference to do this or not, because array.empty is a static reference. Oh, good. Glad to know I'm not alone. Thank you, Raymond. I appreciate it. At this hour, I'm not always sure I can trust my own sanity, so please, 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 if you are following along and something doesn't make sense, question me, because there's a very real chance that I'm probably wrong. So, next question. This guy here is unhappy because this guy here is being concatenated, right? So it's getting to be a nullable string in the return, and so should this one also be nullable? That is a very good question. I think the answer is yes, because we know that this one can be. And I think the very fact that we're concatenating these together, and this guy is already declared that way because he's also coming from get suggestion. So yeah, so this guy should be a nullable string, because we're concatenating two enumerables of nullable strings together. Ugh, tongue-tied. Okay, next up. And we did that one already, so back to our visitor fun. Okay, so this one we may just start at the top and work our way down, because this one I think there's a bunch of them in here. And again, because this is a visitor pattern, there's probably going to be a lot of these cases where it doesn't really make sense. So the main problem child, I can almost guarantee, are going to be these two fields here, right? Because once again, these two fields start as null, because when you initially call this guy's constructor, at the end of the constructor, nobody has set either of these fields, which means they're null. Right? But the moment we start visiting things, right, we're going to quickly start hitting those. So you'll note syntax visitor down here. He has the visit method, which then calls visit internal, which starts iterating. And we've got all these virtual methods, yada, yada, yada. This guy overrides most of the ones that he cares about. Yeah. So dumb and not some suggestion. Find and replace all string with string question mark. So, yeah. So to answer the question, Raymond, there are a number of ways I've seen people go about adding nullable reference types to a project. One option is to not enable it project-wide like I did here, right, and go file by file, because you can also do the let's see. Not like that. You can do pound nullable and then enable, disable, or what is it? Restore. What is it? Yeah, restore. So you can toggle it on and off specifically in individual source, like one at a bit. So I've seen people go through and turn it either on or off at the project level and then add this to all of their files one way or the other, right? That way they can go through file by file and turn it on. Blindly replacing string with string question mark, I think, would really, really depend on the project that I'm in, because I think in a lot of cases by doing that, you start to lose the benefits of nullable reference types if you just make everything nullable. Right? If everything's nullable, don't bother to turn on nullable reference types, because the goal is to have things not null, because most of the time on initialization, like for example this unparsed tokens, right, we're very explicitly setting it not null. It's read only. We can make some good assumptions. If somebody later checks this for null, we should smack them, say no, not null. We've declared it that way. So having that sort of extra syntax checking, I think, is worth it. So I guess my only thought is, yes, that would work, but I think you would lose a lot of the benefits with the blind replace. I think the easiest thing to do is to turn it on and try to determine which way is going to be the least amount of work, right? Of Do I turn it on at the project level and disable it and go file by file? Or do I turn it off at the project level and turn it on file by file until I get to a reasonable point, right? And then just find and replace the pound nullables. Because not everybody can afford, like especially in a really, really big project, going through and upgrading your entire project is a massive undertaking. Like this is not a huge project, right? Like it's big, but not like this is not unreasonably big. Like this is something that like few evenings worth of work probably done, right? Like I went through it in a few hours and took this thing from a few hundred warnings to 50 without really batting much of an eye at it. That was all the easy cases. So, but again, this is not what I would consider a large project. Like I've seen ones where you've got tens of thousands of files and it's just not reasonable to bite it all off at once. Unless you've got somebody willing to invest the development time, it's sort of a hard one to justify going at it all at once. Okay, I digress. So we are on the hunt for the ones in here, right? And again, it's likely those two fields that are going to be our problem child. Okay, so visit command node, right? So we get into here. Innermost command result has the potential of being null. All right, so let's look at command result. So parent could be null. That's fine. That's fine. Visit command node. So here's the thing. I don't think it's possible to get to visit command node without hitting visit root command node. And I think we can confirm that here. Right? So I suppose it technically is possible. Could I instantiate this up, right, and cause that to happen? I mean, I could always invoke, well, no, these are internal classes. Yeah, these are internal classes. It's not, I think the simple answer on this one is unless there's another bug, this is not possible, right? Because the only way to get here is to have an invalid object model generated by something else in the code. Yeah, it's not worth, this is not worth a null check. I would disagree on that one. Okay, so command result here. So innermost command. So command argument, right? And again, this is another one of these cases where how do you get a command argument without having a command result? Not possible outside of another bug, right? And we've got enough stuff checking it. What are you squawking about here? Reference comparison. Yeah? I think it just wants explicit. That's a resharperism. Okay, option node. Again, you can't get to an option without having a command. Therefore, that will be set. Let's see. Error list. I should just pin this rather than up, down, up, down, up, down, up, down. F8 also works to jump in. Visit option argument. You're going to have to explain this to me if you have a second. I'm not tracking how it's not possible to hit these sub-methods without having a command node instantiated. No, that is a great question, Raymond. So, I am going to first grab one of the wiki pages because I am not going to try and do this. Whoa, that is big. Let's not be so big. So on here, syntax, concepts, and parser. So John has gone through and written out a lot of really nice documentation. So if you're here, John, thank you. It's wonderful. And I will drop this in the chat. Boom. Explaining all of these types. The key thing to know about this is when you invoke something on the command line, ultimately all of that stuff that you type, like if you type in dir/a, right? That /a is ultimately an option for a command that you executed. Dir was the root level command, and the command itself has an option that's /a or --all or whatever, right? And so in order to get to the part where you're actually processing an option, there always has to be a root level command. If there's not a root level command, your terminal won't invoke the command line app, and you'll never get this far. So that's the principle that I'm operating on, is that the only way to get here is I'm making the sweeping assumption that if I'm inside of this code, that my code was executed. Which it sounds obvious, but that is an assumption, right? The other thing is, though technically possible, because this is just a visitor pattern where it does start, visit, stop, right? And it's just got this switch. At first glance, it looks like it's very easy to get to these other like option nodes without ever hitting the root command node. Correct. Yeah, the root command in question is actually the command line command. Yes. So it'll be so you either have to specify one, or it'll default to the name of your executable. At least that's how this library defines it. So in order to get that far, we had to have hit a root level command. Technically, it is possible to pass a weird syntax node tree that doesn't conform to that ordering, right? That is certainly possible. The problem is I couldn't even write a test to do that because these things are internal classes. So unless I do something to expose these internals outside of my library, I know that the internals of my library don't actually even allow that to happen. So if you look at our unit tests, most of them just take in a command line invocation and then act on it. Slapping my mic around. And there's no way for me to write up a command line command that could bypass this, right? I would fail a bunch of other tests before I could get a structure that would actually fail this. So that's the assumption that I'm making, and that's how I'm acting on it and saying it's not possible to get to an options argument without having a command first. So I'm making those assumptions and just turning these off. The visitor pattern does not lend itself well to this nullable reference type stuff. So that's a bit unfortunate. We could probably get fancy with some of these things and rewrite it, but it seems like more trouble than just telling the compiler, hands off, trust me, I know better. I am programmer, hear me roar. Okay, option result though. So this one here I think is possible, right? So from the command, we're going to look at the command's children, and we're going to get the result for a given option. Yeah, nothing has ever gone wrong with Kevin just going, nah, it's 11 o'clock, just do it. So result 4, right? So this one we very much know is possible to return null, right? Because it can iterate over singular default. Default case is definitely a null. So yeah, so that one can happen. So this guy pulls it out. Though it is, so here's the one thing though, right? Like this says result 4 option, right? And it's passing this guy in. How would we get here, right? Like in order to build a test to cause this to occur, I would have to have an argument node with a parent option, and the option would have to be a child of the command, but when I ask the command for the result for the option, it would have to give me back a null. Is there an extra level to this? No, this is literally just iterating over items. Yeah, I don't think this is possible either. So this then asks for the argument, which is possible because you can have one without it, because arguments could be omitted in the case of defaults. That is possible. Let's see here. So if that is the case, okay, that handles that. It's even later over here. What time zone are you in, Raymond? Utah. So let's see. When I travel to Salt Lake, that's 1 hour ahead, I think. 2 hours ahead. Is it Central or Mountain? I trust my phone. 1 hour. Okay. So again, stop. Not possible to get to this point without starting. Therefore, we're going to call it, Mountain Standard 1 hour. No, one of my clients that I work for is in, or I should say, just outside of Salt Lake. So, been over there a couple times, but not likely to travel much right now. Let's see, innermost command, validate command result. I want to check this and see where it's invoked from. Yeah, so after a stop. So this guy is not possible. Root command result, again, we would have to get here without a root command, not possible. And let's see here, that one we just handled. This one's fun, arity failure. So we get a failure. Error message is nullable. Because it's possible to new up one of these guys without having it. So is it possible to get into here and get a failure without a message? Right, so we have this guy returns non-null, but his error message is null. So that's not, well, I don't like this, right? Because technically, so we allow these error messages to be injected, right? Somebody could set these up. So we don't have localizations set up. Yeah, Megan, flights are so cheap. Yeah, I have a feeling my wife would have other thoughts if I said I was flying somewhere right about now. Oh, cool. Yeah, Raymond, I'll hit you up. Last time I was down there, I ended up hanging out just in the airport at Salt Lake for like 5 or 6 hours because we got done early and I had nothing to do. But yeah, shoot me an email with your, or hit me up on Gitter with your contact info, and I will let you know. Obviously, it might be a while, but yeah. So back to this though, right? So validation messages is set up for localization, with the idea being that if somebody wanted to go through and localize this for Spanish, French, whatever, right? It can be done, right? All of these messages are overwritable. So the only way I don't like this, right? Because it is the only way to do this, to get a null in here, would be to override the validation messages, explicitly return a null, and then it could happen, right? Because then parse error comes in here, right? Message comes in. You know what? I'm going to propose that we do this. Tell the compiler hands off, because if the null case does occur, the person who did it is going to promptly get an argument exception, not a null reference exception, telling them that the value cannot be null or whitespace. I think that makes sense. Again, technically possible on an outside chance. Like I could write the code to do it. But you'd have to write the code to do it, be in a C#7 or a non-nullable context so you wouldn't get warned about the null. Yeah, it seems very, very unlikely. Okay, validate command handler. Let's see here. So this guy here, this guy here, this guy here. Great, great, great. You'll note that it is somewhat intelligent. Excuse me. in that I use this guy here to say not null, and it knows that these guys are now also not null further down, because if it was null, this throws a no reference exception. So, huzzah. Okay, again, this is the same situation with the error message, so I'm just going to turn it off. It's technically possible, highly unlikely. This one is more interesting. So let's see. We've got an argument result and an argument result where the parent could possibly be null. So how would you get an argument result? Let's look at this. So parent clearly can come in as null, but on this guy's constructor. Again, I'm noticing that the constructor is internal, which means I can make certain assumptions about its usage. Most notably that no one outside is going to mess with it. So there is this one down here on a convert, right? Which would require... This is inside of it, so it would require an instance where my parent was already null. So that's not as likely. Command result, is this guy nullable? Technically yes, but no, because null there, so that guy's non-nullable. Option result, non-nullable. Let's see, O could not be null because we would have blown up there instead, so those are all non-null. This is non-null. This appears to be the only place where it happens. Very clearly being passed in. Default value factory, parent is null. Yeah, because it's just looking up the default value. That feels like an awkward API. But, again, not here to fix API. The key part is there is technically a way. So, the only use case where we instantiate it with a null parent is when we're getting the default value for it. It's not possible to hit that as part of the parsing. Because it's not possible as part of the parsing. I almost don't like doing it here, only because though it's currently not possible, somebody could change that in a very disparate area of the code, and then it would be possible. So, yeah, Megan, so the answer is right now we're inside of the parse results visitor. So this is somewhat domain knowledge of how the project is set up. So this visitor is acting over all of the parse results. And the only place when we look at the so this is argument result.parent, right? And the only way to get the parent to be null is to pass it through the argument results constructor. And the only place where a null is possible to pass into the argument result constructor is this one here. But this one here is used to retrieve the default value, which is never going to be used as part of the parse results. Which is why it's not possible. However, I only know that because I dug through, all, what is this, 3, 5, 6 references to the constructor to figure out all their usages. So with the current 6 usages, it's not possible. I know that parent will always be set on every instance that makes it into here. But only because I went through and looked at it. It doesn't mean somebody couldn't just add another invocation of the constructor somewhere in parsing that passed null as the parent and get away with it. And that's why it's like, so currently this would be valid. But I cannot say that somebody wouldn't change that assumption that I'm making sometime in the future. Okay, I think you just talked me out of it. Or I talked myself into it. I just hate it. Because in all of the cases that exist now, parent will not be null here. In all of the cases that exist now. It feels like what I would rather do is, so longer term, I think what would be potentially cleaner, right? So the other thing is, I believe parent is internal too. No, it's public. Interesting. I think longer term, what I would love to do is see about refactoring this such that parent didn't necessarily need to be here, or make parent non-nullable. Non-nullable. Make parent not nullable. That's what we're going for. That way we don't have to deal with this yucky case, right? Because the only reason it's nullable is because we've got this stupid case here where this API wants to act on an argument result, and so we have to create one. And because we're just creating one willy-nilly, we pass null for the parent, right? And then this guy goes and does a factory call out, which could be in a third party, which is fine, but it feels like the problem is this API, right? Like this, if it wasn't trying to act on this result, or there was something else or something, right? Again, this is not, I am not refactoring. I am not refactoring. I'm resisting the urge to refactor. Okay, error message. Again, I'm just going to say not possible, not reasonably possible. This guy, populate default values. I believe this is called only once at the very end. Yeah, so this is only called once at the very end of it. You sound like an addict. I am not addicted to Mountain Dew. I just consume it in copious amounts. I will say, it feels like the caffeine is slowly doing less and less for me with all of this stay-at-home thing. I feel like I consume more caffeine when I'm at home than when I'm in the office. I don't know if that's a good thing. So recurse while not null. So this feels like something where if it's explicitly going to check it for null, something like that, I think, right? Does that do it? Oh no, because that doesn't actually change that. I think what I want is nullable class. I think I even want to go further than that, right? I think I want this. Because yield return source. So the assumption being that source is not null. And so converting to non-nullable type. Okay, so what have we done? So the problem is if we declare this is nullable, so let's just do this. If source is null, yield break. Yeah, Raymond. So I think my plan is going to be streaming Tuesday nights now. The COVID thing has screwed up my schedule. So I was doing Thursdays. I think I'm now doing Tuesdays. I think it may not be every week. It may be every other week. I'm still trying to figure out my schedule and how it's going to work. So I think Tuesday-ish nights. I'll post it up on my Twitter. But probably Tuesday nights is going to be the schedule, I think. I hope. So, yeah, so I think we do this. That way the enumerable can keep returning non-nullable things. This thing handles the null case right out the gate. And then everyone gets to be happy. I think I like that. We're going with it. Okay, so yeah, you too, Raymond. Have a good night. I realize it's like 12:30 there. I should probably be considering bed shortly, but I feel like I want to get this further. There's just so much here. Okay, I think I have covered all of these. Okay, so that one's covered. What do you? Command result C. Oh, because you are technically non-null. If we change this, I think we can do this though, right? Because we know every value that we pass into this lambda will be non-null. Yes, bed is definitely a myth. Have a good night, Raymond. Yeah, so that fixes that, and then we don't have to propagate it. Okay, so that's a little cleaner. That's a little happier. They're fixed. They're fixed. They're fixed. Okay, so parse result. And again, this is one of those, I know the only way to get here is to have these things already. Well, hold on. This guy is interesting. Right? Could we get here? We could very easily get here. I could new up one of these guys. Well, no, so I could, if this guy was newed up, right? So nothing in the constructor sets either these guys, and then call dot result right away. That would certainly do it. Interesting. So that, I don't think it's fair to make that assumption. But I think what is fair to do is throw a new valid operation exception. And I don't know what the message should be, so yeah. I'm sure somebody will have a strong opinion about what the message should be, and I don't know what it is. So there's that, there's that. Okay. Clean some of these guys up. Okay, so all argument results. So let's look at this guy. So where are we at? We are in a root command result. Right? So once again, we've got this case where we've got some fields. We invoke the constructor. They aren't set. So clearly null right after the constructor is invoked. Okay, so then we look at this, add symbol to symbol map. This guy gets invoked. This indenting bothers me. And these guys could be null. So what? Ensure result maps are initialized is what sets them. Find results for. I kind of think I just need to be calling this and then doing exclamation points. Because these ones were easy, right? Like, these guys all call ensure result maps are initialized. Great. And so it's got an early return. I think that's what we do. I think we come down here. We add this. And then we just say, you will not be null. You will not be null. You will not be null. And unit test confirm. I don't break anything by doing that. Excellent. So carry on the merry way. String extensions. Okay, this one's going to be interesting. So here we've got some really fun cases. So shield your eyes. It's going to get ugly. So we have some methods in here, right? and they're kind of bigger than you would normally want to write. For example, this method here, tokenize, which is sort of the big method, right? You get some random string array from your main method, right? And you've got to turn it into tokens. And so it's got all kinds of rules and parsing and all kinds of magical stuff. This is the sucky part of if you try to parse that string array yourself inside of your main, right? To do it right requires a whole bunch of ugly, right? So here we get into a really weird situation. Because now we've got this guy here, where the question is, how do we decorate these? These are local functions, right? Now, for example, previously we had fun with things like maybe null when false, right? The problem is this won't even compile here, because these are local functions, and it is not legal to put attributes on local functions, which is exciting. So the solution that we have to solve this doesn't actually even work here, which is great. Emphasis on the high level of sarcasm, right? So those don't work. Is there a reason that isn't allowed? Yes. The simple reason is when they implemented local functions, it was not high enough on the priority list that it got punted. The adding of attributes on local functions will likely make it into .NET 5. So it was one of those, was not high enough on the priority list. Local functions got introduced before nullable reference types, and then nullable reference types followed shortly thereafter. So there's, yeah. One feature kind of stomped on another feature, and they didn't all play together nicely. So that's fun. So we have to figure out how we're going to do this, because I'm curious what replacement can be, because there's only 2 setters for it. So, and just to make this even more fun, right? Because we've got a local function, and inside of our local function, we have 2 more local functions. I don't want to know how deep this goes. So I'm going to collapse those so I don't have to look. So we've already got that kind of fun to deal with, right? Okay. So first of all, let's look at this. This guy here clearly looks to be able, so this is another local function. It's hard to tell, but that little lambda is the giveaway. It's an expression-bodied member as a local function. The fact that I see a null inside of the ternary means I'm pretty confident I can do this. So, because if you're going to explicitly return a null, you deserve what you get. Okay, so that guy there, the fun part is because I don't see him being used here. Oh no, that probably means he's used inside of one of these other ones. Oh, he is. Oh, he is. So this is just going to get really weird, right? Oh. Oh no. Oh no. Oh no. Oh no. Yeah, so this is going to be a whole new level of complex and weird. So you know, this is a local function, but like a lambda delegate, right? Local functions can capture local variables. This local variable is not actually declared inside of this function. It's declared all the way up in the main function. And he's then acted on and used down in here. Sigh. This is, yeah. Again, this is why you don't parse that string array yourself, because it is fraught with peril. And this would be the peril. Okay, so we've got that. But let's, so the 2 issues we still have though, right, is how to declare this. Because there's a chance this is going to be the answer, right? Because that goes there. Try unbox. This guy's already preemptively declared. Oh, and this gets even more fun, right? Because this name matches this name. This variable hides this variable so it won't be captured, because that's not going to confuse anybody. This guy's clearly nullable. I would love to set not nullable when, but I can't set the attribute. What are you squawking about? This guy hides a variable. Oh. Yeah, but that's okay. I think the hiding is acceptable. We might get away with something simple. Okay, so now the question is, can be unbundled, right? We just made U nullable. What is the fallout of that? Can be unbundled. So var replacement, right? I think this needs to go like that. Arglist insert range. I find it shocking that this thing knows that this isn't unhappy about that being null. I find that shocking. But it seems happy, so I'm not going to stress about it. So there's that. There's that. There's that. Has raw alias. Potential root command. So where are we? So this is clearly a nullable string. We could easily get here with it still being null. So the question is, has raw alias, wants a non-nullable type, go to implementation. Yeah, raw aliases. Oh, this is interesting. Raw aliases could theoretically contain a null. Okay, so this guy's, so I think, given that this guy is null propagation, clearly a null is possible, right? Which would mean that this guy, if this were null, this would get short-circuited and this would be null. This would fall into here and throw, which is why this exclamation point here is valid. Because if this were null, then we wouldn't ever get down to here. Does this mean this guy is not null? I'm trying to decide if this should be a list of nullable strings. Because if this were null, it's not possible. So I think this is fine, right? And it's not possible to get a null into here. So declaration, fine. Usage is a read-only list, fine. So no way for somebody to add a null in there. Find results. This here we just evaluated and determined that the null will never make it to here. By the time we get to here, we're not null. Which means this guy here has raw alias. There's no point in making this a nullable string because null will never be in here. Therefore, this tracks. Which means if we go back all the way to how this started, back up to here, if this is null, though it won't blow up, it doesn't make sense. Normalize root command. So the question is, what should we do? What should we do if this is null? Has raw alias. Should we use that? I think we null check this, right? So I think we do Let's just do not equal to null. I think we do that and just assert that it's not null there. And didn't break any tests, so good enough. And we actually reached the end of the list. Now we hit compile and see what the fallout was. We only changed a few hundred things. What could have possibly gone wrong? Here, get cracking. Tell me what's the over-under. Only 26 files changed. That's not even that much. Let's see. Build succeeded. Oh, we're just down to 6. I kind of want to keep going for the moment, just because it feels like I can. Okay. Is any alias in use? Let's look at this. Maybe null when false. Okay. All right, I think the kicker is we do that here, right? And we do this here, because this is the same case where it's unhappy here, because so actually I think maybe a better way to handle it is like this, right? So we allow that guy to be nullable, knowing that on true it will be set to a value, which it knows, but that doesn't really matter because it's only using it for a message, which would then ultimately just end up as an empty string, not a no reference exception. But this way we assert that we've got a good message. Okay, so that handles 2 of them. So that'll handle that. Let's look here. Get argument or default value type. So I think this one just propagates up to here. Surprised I didn't catch that when I did that before. Yeah, so air list. Let's see, value for option. This guy is a maybe null, and on an object type, null is certainly valid, so we're going to just propagate that forward. And then here, did that go away or did it flag me again? Looks like it's fine. Sometimes it's a little delayed and I thought I saw it. Okay, so get by alias can return a nullable symbol, which we're casting to an I command. Current command, where are you declared? You are clearly nullable. This is assuming get by alias. Why do you assume that you are possible? So, symbol set is there. So you're either coming from the configuration set of all symbols. So a symbol here is a command or an option. I don't... arguments may count as symbols too. I don't remember. But regardless, it has multiple types, but in this case we are explicitly hunting by a command. We know our token is not of type option because we would have fallen into here. So this is hunting out, I'm guessing with all of these ifs, we've fallen into the token case of we know we're a command because that's the last possible choice. It's tested everything else. This guy tries to pull it from arg, which I'm guessing is whatever we're iterating over. Yeah, so we're iterating over our argument stuff, so that's the current one. And it's trying to pull it by alias. I'm wondering if... See, the problem is if I do this, right, and I let the nullable go through, that fixes this line, but now I'm left to deal with this, of what to do if it is null. And I'm not entirely sure. Because I could then null propagate forward, right? And then this guy ends up as null, which he's declared as non-nullable, which is now makes this more interesting, right? Because now I have to deal with this being potentially null, and then it's promptly used here to make another hash. So I don't like that. That makes me unhappy. But the question is what to do here. I could explain. So this symbol set in question, get by alias. So like we're already straight up assuming that we can convert to an I command, and this code is already making the assumption that it will be there. I think that is the assumption. Because given all of our fallbacks here, we know we aren't in any of these other cases. And we have significantly tested all of this parsing code repeatedly. So I'm a little less scared of it because we have a good unit test suite over that. So error list. That guy there is now handled. Okay. Build. Come on, baby. No warnings. No warnings. Yes! I will take it. Okay. Yay! Thank you, Megan. Awesome. Okay, step 1. Mild success, commit immediately. Handling all nullable reference type warnings in core project. Okay, so commit changes. There's all of that. Push. Okay, so that gets a very large bit of stuff through. I'm trying to decide if I open a work in progress pull request or if I wait. There's still some outstanding items that need to be done, right? So, like one of the changes that went in here was that CS proj change here, right? Like where I just blindly whacked net 462. We probably shouldn't do that. We should actually probably address it. But it's also 1142. So I'm trying to decide if I address it tonight or if I address it later. And I think the answer is I stop coding now and I address it later. I think that's the solution. I think that is the solution. So, but I think in the interest of getting feedback and having stuff get done, refresh, pull request, and I think what we're going to do, we're going to start this in C# 8 nullable reference types. Sure. So this way we can handle, and we can open up, and if people want to comment and have a discussion on how to handle this, we can deal with this. So, because I think this thing actually has, let me just check real quick on one of the other pull requests. I think we have the work in progress check. Yeah. So if you do a pull request and you type WIP on it, it won't let it merge. So that will be convenient. Starting work on handling C# 8 nullable reference types. The current work only handles it in the core library. Outstanding to-do items. So let's see here. I'm going to do a nice little checky list. Conditionally include nullable reference type attributes to support net 462. Let's see here. Confirm upgrade to net standard 2.1 is acceptable. We could conditionally include, well, I guess this is not explicitly needed since we will already be including attributes. I'm trying to, I feel like there was one other to do that I had in here. Oh, I don't know. So this change here, so the, let's see, handle, let's see, handle possible null setter values on argument arity dot, what was that thing? I think it was argument type, because it was the typey thing. Typey, the very first thing I broke. Type, it's passed in here. Find usage. Oh, argument. Oh, so it's argument dot argument type. Possible. And we'll just do this and this on, let's see, argument dot boom, code block it, and I think I'm tuning it out. I might have missed it. Did you want an error message for that throws? Good question. So the answer is possibly. And I think you are correct. So that was inside of the, nope, wrong project. That's what you get for having too many Visual Studio open. So that was inside of the result property on parse result visitor. Yeah, so parse result visitor dot result. Let's see. Parse result visitor dot result currently throws invalid operation exception. What should the error messages be for these? So that's a very valid to do. Thank you, Megan. I had forgotten that one. I think the only other one was that error message explicit one, right? So the what was it? Error message, right? So error message on star result classes is declared as nullable because some localization implementation could, in theory, return a null. Currently explicitly ignoring with null forgiveness operator. I think that covers all of them. And if I've missed them, I'm sure somebody will happily hammer me in code review. So yeah, so create pull request and Let's see here. Oh, that's funny. So John had left these comments on my branch like earlier today or yesterday after I had showed him my branch where I had started it. Apparently GitHub is hip to the idea and will pull those comments over from the branch. That's kind of slick. But I addressed all of those earlier, so that is it. So pull request 856 if anyone wants to review and rip me apart. Yeah, so there's all of that. I do think that we will probably deal with those attribute stuff. I don't know if I'm going to wait until next week to do this. There may be another ad hoc stream where I do this, or I might just do it. So if people are interested in seeing more of this resolution stuff on how to finish this out, I'm probably happy to go through and stream it. But I think for now I am probably at my evening's end. So because I'm now like an hour longer than I normally would go. So, but thank you for hanging out, Megan, this whole time. I assume you're doing well so far. I think you come up here in a month, 2 months, something like that. Is that true? Or possibly I've put you to sleep. Yeah, May 8th. Cool. Oh. It would have been cooler if it was May the 4th. That's just the geek in me coming out. Oh. But cool. So, time becomes pretty meaningless when you don't leave your apartment for weeks. Yeah. Yeah. Oh, your finals on May the 4th. Yes. Yes. Hopefully whatever person is teaching that class takes full advantage of that. Awesome. Well, cool. Yeah, I kind of feel the same way. It feels like everybody's just locked in. I spend a lot of time sitting on a computer because there's not a lot else to do. So, well, cool. Thanks for hanging out the whole time. Look forward to seeing you up here shortly. And I think I'm going to sign off and try and get stuff wrapped up so I can go to bed. 5 hours of sleep is enough. 6 hours of sleep. Yeah, that should be good. That'll be good. It'll be great. I got plenty of Mountain Dew. So, again, thank you, Megan. Have a good one. We'll talk to you later.